They told me to water the plants and double-lock the doors, like I was some housemaid they could rely on but never invite. "You're too old for long flights, Grandma. Just watch the house." That's what they said before driving off in their shiny black SUV, laughing about Miami beaches and fresh seafood. I didn't let them see my face. I just smiled and waved. The next morning I found their travel envelope in the mailbox, unstamped. 2 adults, 2 kids, all seats together leaving in 3 days. My name wasn't on it, of course. I placed the tickets on the kitchen table and made tea because that's what you do at my age when something hits you in the chest. You make tea and wait for your hands to stop shaking. But they didn't stop, not even when I reached for my old address book and found the number for the agency. "I'd like to cancel these tickets," I said. The girl on the other end hesitated. "Can I ask why, ma'am?" "No," I said calm. "Just cancel them." Silence, then a soft, "Of course." I wrote down the confirmation number, made another cup of tea and sat in the old armchair where I used to rock my son to sleep. My husband's photo was still on the mantel, Paul smiling like he hadn't been gone 20 years. If he were here, this never would have happened. I'd been everything in this house: wife, nurse, cook, fixer of toys and broken hearts. Now I was just Grandma, not Helen, not Mom. A quiet shadow in the background. They thought I'd sit at home waiting for cheerful photos in the family chat. "We miss you, wish you were here," they'd write, knowing full well they'd never meant to take me. I stared at the cancelled tickets, then opened the drawer where I kept my passport. It was still valid. I had $12,000 in savings, a few bonds, no debts, and no one depending on me anymore. So I booked a flight. Miami, one-aisle seat. I called my neighbor Carol. "Could you water the plants?" "Sure, honey. Going somewhere?" "Just a little trip," I said. I packed a single suitcase, comfy shoes, my best scarf, and that navy dress I hadn't worn since Paul's funeral. Not because of grief, but because it made me feel sharp, and I'd forgotten how that felt. That night I sat on the porch. The street was quiet, ivy rustling in the breeze. I wondered what they'd say when they realized. Maybe they'd call. Maybe not. I didn't care. For once I wasn't staying behind. Morning came soft. I locked the door, left a note for Carol, and walked down the steps slow but steady. The gate agent barely glanced at my passport. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am." I didn't answer, just held my suitcase handle tight and my boarding pass like a shield. I hadn't flown in 30 years. The airport felt loud and cold, all glass and metal, full of strangers rushing to their own lives. But I walked like I belonged. Pretending you belong is half the battle when you've been invisible too long. On the plane I sat by the aisle. The seat next to me stayed empty until the last moment when a man in his 30s, wedding ring, tired eyes, slid in with a sigh. "Long trip?" he asked. "Long enough," I said. He smiled, then left me alone, which I appreciated. I slept most of the flight, not deeply, just enough to keep grief from turning into anger. When I woke, we were flying over endless blue. That's when it hit me, I'd really done it. I wasn't here for sightseeing or photos. I was here because they told me not to come. At the hotel, nothing fancy, just clean. The woman at the desk called me ma'am, like it still meant something. I set my suitcase down, sat on the bed and stared at the tiled floor. No tears. Grief doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes it's just sitting still, remembering birthdays and holidays where you smiled through being unwanted. That evening I wandered a few blocks, found a bakery, ordered bread and olives. The waiter was kind, didn't rush me. I ate slowly, no phone, no one waiting for updates. Next morning, soft light filled the room. I opened the shutters and, for the first time in years, put on lipstick, a shade I wore back when life wasn't all beige and apologetic. I asked the front desk for somewhere quiet, not touristy. "Try Little Havana," the clerk said. So I went. Bright houses, narrow alleys, music spilling from open doors. Everything felt stubbornly alive. I sat on a stone bench, watching couples pass, laughing and young. No one told me I was too old. No one told me to just watch the house. I thought of my granddaughter, Emily, 16, always sending me silly filters and photos with her tongue out. I wondered what she'd say if she saw me here. Probably laugh. Maybe roll her eyes. I pulled out a postcard and wrote before I could stop myself. "Dear Emily, guess where I am? Miami. The ocean's bluer than you can imagine. Hope you're well. Love, Grandma." I didn't write to my son or his wife. They didn't need to know. The post office was next to a cafe, so I dropped the card in and ordered coffee, drinking it slowly like my mother used to when mornings were still quiet. That night back in my room I caught myself humming a tune Paul used to sing while shaving. I hadn't thought of it in years. I wasn't young. I wasn't brave. But I was finally where I wanted to be. That counted for something. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone. That wasn't the point. But life has its own timing. It happened at breakfast 2 days later. I sat by the window buttering toast too carefully, when a woman about my age sat at the next table. Silver hair in a no-nonsense bun, sharp eyes behind half-moon glasses. "You use too much butter," she said not unkindly. I looked up amused. "Better than too little." She nodded. "Fair." Her name was Margaret, a retired school principal from Boston traveling alone. Widowed, she said it like it was just another passport stamp. She had that quiet confidence some women wear like perfume, soft but impossible to ignore. We started taking morning walks. Margaret noticed everything others ignored. An old purple shutter, a stray dog asleep by a statue. No photos, no rush, just looking. At lunch under a vine-covered terrace, we shared cold white wine. She talked about her students, the troublemakers she secretly liked best. I told her about my stubborn tomatoes back home. "And your family?" she asked. I hesitated. "They're fine. They just thought I was too old to travel." Her eyes narrowed. "They said that." I nodded. She didn't gasp or pity me, just sipped her wine. "You're here," she said simply. So they were wrong. That night I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I'd stayed quiet, cooking birthday cakes I never sat down to eat. The trips I paid for but was never invited on. How many times I told myself, "They're just busy," or "They need me here." But they didn't. Not really. Not beyond cooking, cleaning, and being the dependable shadow in the house. The next morning Margaret knocked, a folded map under her arm and a spark in her eye. "Florence," she said. "I've always wanted to see the Uffizi." "You?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Why not?" So we booked train tickets that afternoon, 2 women in their 70s buying one-way seats like college kids on summer break. We laughed about it over dinner, though something inside me stayed tight like a stiff muscle waking up. That evening, a message from my daughter-in-law popped up after weeks of silence. "Did you check the garden? The sprinkler system's acting weird." "No, how are you?" "No, where are you?" I didn't reply. Instead I packed slowly, savoring each fold. The navy dress, the pearls, shoes wrapped neatly in a bag. Old habits from a lifetime of practical travel. In the corner sat a vase of daisies Margaret had brought me. "Because you look like someone who appreciates flowers without needing a reason," she'd said. He was right. That night I put my phone in a drawer and turned it off. For the first time in years I didn't feel like someone waiting to be included. I felt like someone moving forward. The train left at 9. We sat in a quiet car, our bags above us, a paper bag of croissants between us. Margaret read a mystery novel in French while I stared out at the rolling hills, soft and golden, stitched with vineyards and sleepy towns. It looked like a painting George once bought at a flea market. Cheap frame, but inside something beautiful. He said it reminded him of places he'd never seen. I never thought I'd see them either. Margaret didn't fill silence with chatter. That was her gift. When the train curved, she looked up, held out the last croissant without a word. I smiled and took it. That was enough. Florence greeted us with warm air and narrow streets. The hotel was old, charming, the elevator creaked, and the brass keys were heavy in my palm. Our tiny balcony looked over red roofs and laundry lines. "I want to see Botticelli," Margaret said, tossing her bag on the bed, "and maybe buy something ridiculous I'll never wear." We did both. The Uffizi was crowded but worth it. Standing before the birth of Venus, something shifted in me. Not all recognition. Quiet beauty that sneaks up on you, softens your throat before you realize. Later we wandered, stopping at a cafe where the waiter flirted with Margaret and she flirted right back. She had this way of feeling young without pretending. I envied that. That night we ate on the quiet side of the river. Pasta with butter and sage, red wine, easy laughter. "You're different now," Margaret said softly. "How so?" "You sit taller, less folded." I didn't answer, just nodded. Later, back in our room, I checked my phone out of habit. 24 missed calls. 14 from my daughter-in-law, the rest from my son. I didn't listen to the voicemails, just scrolled. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please call us." A voice memo. My son's voice, tired and clipped. "Mom, please call." The kids are upset. We thought you'd be home. I stared at the screen, waiting for anger or guilt, but felt only distance. Not cruelty, just space. Enough to breathe. The next day Margaret slept in. I wandered alone through quiet streets, tried on linen skirts and silver earrings but bought nothing. In the afternoon we took a bus up to Fiesole, sitting under trees watching the city stretch below. This, I said, not meaning the view exactly. This was missing. Margaret nodded like she understood. That evening another message. My son again. Mom, did you cancel our vacation on purpose? We got to the airport and, never mind, please call. We're worried. I turned the phone off. Walking back to the hotel, Margaret asked, so where next? I thought for a moment. Lisbon. Always wanted to hear Father live. He grinned. Let's go then. Lisbon felt like an old friend, warm, slightly worn, humming with quiet defiance. We stayed in a guest house with blue shutters and tiled walls, our balcony overlooking a small square where kids kicked a ball between rusty benches. I stood there that evening watching the sun sink behind rooftops, listening to the soft rush of Portuguese voices. Margaret caught a mild fever, waved me off. Go out, see the city. But I stayed, brought her tea, read aloud from a book we'd picked up in Florence. She dozed off, her face peaceful, and it reminded me of George in the hospital, those small gestures of care no one writes poems about but that matter more than anything. I realized then, I'd spent my life looking after others, but this felt different. This felt like choice. That night I cooked eggs, bread and tomatoes from a corner vendor who smiled like we were old friends. We ate on the balcony wrapped in shawls. Margaret's color was back. Thank you, she said softly. For the eggs. For not leaving. I just nodded and sipped my tea. The next morning I woke to Father drifting from the square, that aching music older than sadness. I stood barefoot on the balcony, arms crossed against the morning chill, letting it settle into me. By the time Margaret was ready, the city was alive again. We walked slowly, her still recovering. Passing a church, I watched a woman light a candle, her hands pressed together like holding something fragile. Back at the guest house, I turned my phone on. 5 new messages. This isn't funny, Nancy, from my daughter-in-law. We don't know what to tell the kids. And from my son, you've made your point. Had I? I wasn't sure what point they thought I was making. I hadn't said a word since they left me behind. Margaret saw me reading but didn't ask, just poured tea and handed me the cup. That night we found a Father bar tucked between laundry-streaked alleys. No tourists, just locals and a woman whose voice sounded like rusted silk. She sang of longing, of being left, of standing back up. She wasn't singing for me, but I understood every word. The letter came the next morning, folded into thirds, slipped under the door, my name scrawled in my son's familiar rushed handwriting. I sat on the edge of the bed, the unopened letter in my lap. Margaret caught my reflection in the mirror, adjusting her scarf. She didn't ask. She'd seen it, the way you see a bruise on someone else's skin. Visible but not yours to touch. David's letter was 3 short paragraphs, written with the same stiff politeness he used on forms. Mom, we don't understand what you're doing. The kids are upset. Emily cried. We thought you were just hurt, but this feels like something else. If you're trying to punish us, you've made your point. Please come home. Let's talk. That was it. No apology, no hint they'd planned that trip without me like it was nothing. Just concern for how it looked now that I wasn't there. As if my absence embarrassed them more than their rejection had ever hurt me. I folded the letter, put it in the drawer and stood. Margaret glanced up. So, breakfast, or are we mourning the weak penmanship of disappointing sons? I laughed, actually laughed, and we ate in the courtyard under vines, coffee strong, sweet bread warm. Margaret chatted about tram routes and the Tile Museum, while my mind drifted back to the letter and the quiet that had followed my absence. The truth was, I hadn't left to punish anyone. I'd left because I was tired of asking for a seat at a table that kept shrinking every year. Birthdays had become text messages. Holidays, maybe next year. And now vacations, the fun family ones, came with an unspoken rule. I was no longer included. I hadn't stopped being a mother or a grandmother. They just stopped seeing me. That afternoon I sat on a stone wall by the river, boats gliding past, pigeons arguing over crumbs. My hands rested still in my lap. I thought of Emily, 16, all bright eyes and too much eyeliner. She once called me the egg whisperer after I showed her how to fry an egg. She didn't know about the tickets. Probably thought they forgot to invite me or I'd said no. I pulled out my phone and typed, "Sweetheart, I'm fine. Traveling. Not angry, not hiding, just needed a bit of sky. Love you. Don't worry." I hit send before I could change my mind. Margaret found me half an hour later holding 2 paper bags. "Pastillas de nata. You can't leave Lisbon without these." We ate quietly, watching the shadows stretch across the square. That evening the guest house manager stopped us. "Mrs. Nancy, your daughter-in-law called. He's worried. The children miss you." I nodded. "Thank you. Do you want to call her back?" he asked. "No," he hesitated, then left. I slept better that night than I had in years. The kind of sleep you get when you stop waiting to be needed and start choosing to be whole. In the morning, Margaret spread 2 train schedules across the table, one for Madrid, one for Seville. "Your pick." I looked out at the bright sky, chestnuts roasting on the street below. "Seville," I said. "Let's see what else they think I'm too old for." Seville burned in the bones, not just from heat pressing down like a warm hand, but from life itself. Proud, unapologetic. Our hotel sat between a bakery and a dusty leather shop, the balcony heavy with the scent of orange trees and faint flamenco guitar. Margaret clipped silver hoops to her ears. "This place demands earrings." I had none, but I pinned my hair back and put on lipstick, the same nearly empty tube I'd found weeks ago. For the first time in years I thought about buying another. That evening we followed the sound of clapping to a courtyard restaurant where a small group performed flamenco. Not for tourists, just for each other. A woman danced, older than us, her face fierce, feet striking the floor like a promise. I couldn't look away. "She's older than we are," Margaret whispered. I looked closer. 75 at least. I didn't applaud, just watched, heart full. The next day, we wandered the Alcazar, its walls telling stories in tile and light. I thought of all the stories I'd swallowed, years of being quiet, making space for others, tucking away my own disappointments. But here, walking through those gardens, I didn't feel fragile. No one offered to hold my arm. No one called me dear. I belonged. Later, at a cafe, I watched people pass until I froze. A woman with sharp blonde hair, so much like my daughter-in-law. My chest tightened, then eased. Of course it wasn't her. Back at the hotel, I found a message from Emily. "Grandma, where are you now? Your Lisbon photo was amazing." I showed it to my art teacher. He said, "You have a great eye. Can I call you soon?" I frowned. I hadn't sent her a photo. Then I opened my gallery. There it was. Me on the balcony in Lisbon, arm resting on the rail, looking out at the street. Not posing, just existing. I typed back, "Seville now. Hot, loud, beautiful, you'd love it. I'll call tomorrow." That night, lying in bed in a soft cotton nightgown I'd bought from a street vendor who called me La Señora Valle, the brave lady, I thought of all the times I'd said, "You go ahead. I'll be fine," even when I wasn't. But now here I was in Seville, music drifting through the window. Tomorrow I'd dance, not for anyone, just to remember that I could. By mid-morning my phone buzzed again. "David, 26 calls in 2 days, one voicemail after another." I didn't listen. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done asking to be heard. Margaret was already dressed, straw hat and linen dress floating around her as she moved. "There's a market by the river," she said. "I feel like haggling." We walked slowly, sun warm on my neck, sandals scraping the old stones. The market was alive, men shouting prices, kids darting between stalls. Something loosened in my chest, a knot untied without me noticing. I bought a yellow scarf, bright as marigolds, a color I never wore but suddenly felt like mine. While Margaret argued over a basket, I sat under a faded umbrella with a cold drink and checked my messages. A voice memo, not from David this time, but Emily. "Grandma, I don't know if you'll hear this, but I miss you. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They think you're proving a point, but I don't. I think you just got tired of being left behind. I would have been too." Emily's voice in the last message cracked something open. "You look happy in that photo. I've never seen you like that. Just call me, okay? Even if it's only for a minute." I listened twice, then again. That single line, "even if it's only for a minute," broke whatever was left of my hesitation. While Margaret hunted for olives, I sat on the edge of the bed, the yellow scarf folded in my lap, and called. "Grandma." Emily's voice wavered. I heard a kettle boiling, footsteps across tile. "I'm here, sweetheart." A door closed, quiet fell. I thought you'd gone totally rogue, she said, half laughing, half trembling. Not rogue, I smiled, just found something I'd forgotten I'd lost. What? She asked. Myself. Silence, then softly, I get it. I think I get it more than Mom and Dad do. I believed her. We talked 15 minutes about her drawings, a boy she liked, little things that felt big. Are you coming back soon? She asked carefully. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Can I see you when you do? Of course, baby. We hung up and I felt lighter, not because anything was fixed but because truth clears the air. Margaret returned, grinning, a bag of olives in her hand. Victory, she declared. We ate them on the balcony, the sunset bleeding red across the sky. I think they're starting to understand, I said quietly. Who? She asked. Pie family. She nodded. About time. That night I didn't sleep much. Not from restlessness but from something new, something solid, like finding the ground after floating too long. In the morning I tied the yellow scarf around my neck, no reason except that I wanted to. Lisbon had been soft and aching, Florence graceful and slow. But Seville had burned away the part of me still trapped in apology. Now with my ticket in hand we boarded the train to Granada. Margaret hummed. She never hummed in the mornings. What's the occasion? I teased. She raised an eyebrow. The Alhambra. I hum for architecture. I smiled and watched the countryside blur by. Granada felt quiet, not silent, just sure of itself. Narrow streets whispered between stone walls. The air smelled of oranges and old earth. Our small inn overlooked rooftops and laundry lines, the kind of honest view that doesn't pretend to be more. That evening I sat alone on the terrace, scrolling through messages, not to react, just to prove I could. It's a strange kind of freedom, choosing silence. But one caught me, David's, just one line. Mom, did we lose you? No anger, no guilt. Just something real. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the notebook I'd bought in Lisbon and started writing what I'd never said aloud. I wasn't always tired. I just got tired of not being seen. Every time you called me old-fashioned, I swallowed a sentence I should have said. I still remember you at 5 giving me a rock and calling it precious. That was the last time you gave me something just because. I miss being called by my name. I didn't cry. I just wrote. The next morning we climbed the hill to the Alhambra. My knees ached but I kept going, not to prove anything, just to stand there myself. The arches, the fountains, the carved walls whispered of patient hands and time. Margaret snapped a photo of me on a bench, light and shadow framing my face. You look like someone who remembered something important, she said. I have, I answered. I remembered I was never just someone who stayed behind. Back at the inn, a message from Emily waited. Grandma, I think Dad's realizing things are different now. He asked if I'd heard from you. I told him yes. He looked scared, like he knows flowers won't fix this. I said, she's not angry. She's just finished. I hope that was okay. I smiled and sent her Margaret's photo of me at the Alhambra, hands on hips, face calm. No caption. Emily replied with a heart, and that was enough. The next morning we took an early bus to Cadiz. Margaret claimed the sea air worked wonders for her lungs, but I think she liked the wind tangling her hair, making her feel wild. The coast unfolded wide and blue, fishing boats dragging nets like tired promises. That evening we walked the beach barefoot. The waves weren't dramatic, just steady. A couple older than us strolled past, fingers locked like the answer to a question they didn't need to ask anymore. I sat on a rock, watching the sun dissolve into the horizon. Margaret hummed behind me the same tune from the train. My phone buzzed. David again. Please, just let us hear your voice. I stared at the screen, then opened the voice memo app. I didn't rehearse. I just spoke. David, I'm not angry, but I am changed. I spent my life waiting to be asked, to be needed, to be seen. Sometimes I was, but mostly I was the background. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I love you, always will. But I'm not coming back to the role you gave me. If you want me in your life, it has to be as a person, a whole one. I hope you understand. Good night. I hit send. The sea whispered against the rocks like it understood. When I returned, Margaret looked up from her book. You sent it, she said. I nodded. How do you feel? Like I finally said the thing I've swallowed for 20 years. Margaret smiled. About damn time. That night, I dreamt of endless hallways lined with closed doors, each one clicking open as I passed. I didn't look back. In the morning there was no reply from David, just a message from Emily. A drawing. Me on the beach, scarf blowing sideways, her caption. She looks like she remembered who she was. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned to Margaret. Let's go dancing tonight. She blinked. Dancing? Do your knees even allow that? I grinned. They'll learn. The bar wasn't meant for us. Too young, too loud, too sure of itself. But for the first time in years I didn't care. I wasn't there to fit in. I was there to move. The club was a converted warehouse by the docks, dim lights, heavy bass, and a haze of sweat and perfume clinging to the walls like old history repurposed. But we went anyway. Margaret wore her silver hoops, lipstick sharp, hair loose. I tied the yellow scarf in my hair like a ribbon I'd earned. My cotton dress was old but clean, not screaming for attention, and for the first time I didn't care if I belonged. Belonging had never done me much good. We found a table in the back. The music wasn't flamenco, just a pulsing beat that snuck under your skin. Couples twirled, some offbeat but laughing anyway. A man in worn shoes spun a woman my age, both grinning like kids. Something inside me shifted. I'm going, I said. Margaret blinked. Alone. Yes. I walked onto the floor, no partner, no permission. At first my limbs felt stiff, borrowed, but the beat carried me, shaking off the years like dust. I danced, not gracefully, not skillfully, but fully. A young man smiled, offered his hand. I spun once, laughed, let go. I didn't need him to hold the rhythm. I had my own. Margaret joined later and we danced like schoolgirls at a reunion. Awkward, breathless, giddy. 3 hours passed before we stumbled back to the guest house, barefoot, flushed, collapsing on the bed like teenagers. Irresponsible, she gasped. I know, I laughed. I loved it. My knees ached, my back would hate me tomorrow, but my chest felt wide open. Before sleep I checked my phone. No reply from David, but Emily had written, Dad keeps reading your message. He printed it, left it on the kitchen table. Mom thinks you've lost your mind. I told her maybe you finally found it. I miss you. I'm proud of you. I stared at her words, simple and true. I typed back, tell your father he doesn't need to answer yet. Some truths take time to land. She sent back a little anchor emoji. Made me laugh. I fell asleep with sore feet, tired muscles, and a heart that finally felt like it belonged to me. We left Cadiz at dawn. Margaret slept on the train, her head against the window, arms crossed like someone too used to long rides to bother with comfort. I didn't sleep. I watched the fields roll past, the light crawl across towns I'd never remember. I wasn't restless. I was preparing. Barcelona was our last stop. Neither of us said it, but we both knew. Journeys have a way of softening when the momentum settles. Our hotel was plain, the room small, but the windows opened wide. That night I sat on the balcony with my notebook, page 3 now. I thought if I gave enough, they'd keep me close. But love bought by sacrifice is always the least. I didn't mind aging. I minded being dismissed. Silence isn't always strength. It's fear dressed as patience. I don't regret being a mother. I regret disappearing to become one. My phone buzzed. Laura this time. Her message was longer than usual. Nancy, we've been talking. David doesn't know what to say. He's afraid to say the wrong thing. I told him sometimes listening matters more. We didn't mean to leave you out. We planned that trip thinking it would be easier for the kids. We lied. We were scared of your age. Not because of you, but because it reminded us of ours. I'm sorry. If you ever come home, we want to start over. Just you as you are. I didn't cry. I just sat still for a long while. It wasn't an apology to erase everything, but it felt like a door opening. The next morning, Margaret found me packing. Home, she asked. Eventually, I said. She nodded, sipped her tea. About time you threw the last punch. I laughed. Not a punch, just a door opened. Margaret left 2 days later. No goodbye, just soon. That night, alone, I ordered one last glass of wine, sat by the window. My scarf lay folded on the table, my shoes by the door. I didn't feel finished, but I felt full. Tomorrow I'd buy a ticket, not back to the house they told me to watch, but to the life I was choosing, this time on my terms. The airport didn't feel like goodbye, more like a pause. I wasn't leaving something behind, I was bringing something back. Myself, maybe, or what was left of her after decades of waiting in silence. The flight was quiet. I just stared out the window, watching the land shrink and vanish. When I landed, no one waited and I hadn't expected them to. The air smelled like damp grass, the familiar kind of forgotten. My house was just as I left it. Sharon had watered the plants, the porch was clean. I unlocked the door. Everything inside held its breath. I touched the couch, the chipped bowl, George's photo by the fireplace. Nothing had moved, but everything felt different. I didn't unpack. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table with the window open, letting the silence stretch. My phone buzzed. "Are you home?" Emily wrote. "Yes." 10 minutes later. "Can I come by?" "Yes." Doors open. She arrived 20 minutes later. No big words, no speeches. Just a long, quiet hug that said everything. Emily sat across from me, her backpack still on one shoulder. She looked older than when I left. Not by age, by understanding. "I liked your list," she said. "Pie list." She smiled. "You left your notebook open in that photo." I read part of it. I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. "I've been making one too," she said, pulling a small spiral notebook from her bag. I refused to inherit quietly. The belief that women outgrow desire. The idea that aging is decline. The habit of saying I'm fine, when I'm not. The silence that follows when someone says you're too much. The shame passed down like furniture. I read each line, then looked at her. This girl woman who'd watched me disappear and come back. "You're going to be all right," I said. She nodded. "Because you were." We talked for hours. Art school, her boyfriend, the way her mom still talked too loud when nervous. At one point I squeezed her hand. "You know, your father hasn't called yet." She looked down. "He's scared. Not of you, of what you've become. Of what he never let himself see before." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Emily glanced up. "That's them." She opened the door. I heard muffled voices, then David stepped in like the kitchen was sacred ground. He looked tired, older, Laura close behind him, no makeup, no posture, just real. "We don't know how to start," she said. "You already did," I replied. "You showed up." David moved closer. "I didn't want to lose you." "You didn't," I said. "You just stopped seeing me." His nod was small but honest. "I'm sorry." Not dramatic. "Enough." "There's tea," I said. "Still warm." They sat, not as owners of the space, but as people realizing the seat at the table wasn't theirs by default. It had to be earned. They stayed less than an hour. Awkward sips, long pauses, quiet work reshaping something fragile. I let the silence stretch. Let them feel the quiet I'd lived in for years. Laura asked about my trip. I gave pieces, not the whole. They hadn't earned the whole yet. When they left, David lingered. "Do you want to come for dinner sometime? Just us." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. Relief flickered in his face. After they left, the house felt different. Still quiet but softer, like a pause before a new line. That night, wrapped in a blanket, notebook open, I wrote, "People don't notice your silence until it costs them. Leaving isn't running. You can start over at 72. Some doors don't need to slam, just close softly but firmly. Your voice isn't gone. It's waiting for you to stop asking for permission. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for your own breath." The next afternoon, Emily came again, no warning, just dropped onto the couch like she used to as a kid. "I made a decision," she said, nervous but steady. "I'm applying to the program in Berlin. I know it's far. Mom's freaking out, but I need to go." I didn't flinch. "You should," I said. She blinked. "Really? Don't wait for permission. You'll miss your life." Her slow smile said everything. She stayed for hours. We made soup, talked about books. She laughed when I told her about dancing until our legs gave out. "You're kind of a legend," she teased. "No," I said. "I'm just finally myself." Before she left, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a drawing, me on the Cadiz beach, arms open, head tilted toward the sea. At the bottom, "She didn't come back the same, and that was the point." "I'm getting it framed," she said. I placed it by George's photo on the mantel. You would have understood. The next morning a letter arrived. David's handwriting. "Mom, thank you for the tea, for letting us sit in the silence. I see it now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like to try. Not to erase anything, but to build something better, if you're willing." No big promises, just a man learning to speak differently to the woman who raised him. I didn't reply, not yet. Some silences deserve to be honored. Days passed. I watered my plants, cooked for myself, walked in the mornings, not to punish, not to make them worry, but to feel the shape of my life without them. And it was a good shape. Margaret sent a postcard from Marseille. They still think I'm a widow with a secret inheritance. Let them. On the back, a sketch of two women dancing, one with a yellow scarf, arms lifted. I framed it, placed it by the kitchen window. One morning I called David. Sunday. I'll bring dessert. He sounded surprised, careful as he should. At their house, Laura opened the door, stepped aside. Come in. No rush for hugs, just space. I walked through like a guest, not someone who'd once been there every week. Everything felt changed and I wasn't hurt. They'd kept living. So had I. Dinner was simple, civil, stilted at times. David asked questions. Laura listened more than she spoke. Emily joked. I mostly listened. Toward the end, David cleared his throat. I read your notebook, he said. Emily showed me. It hurt. Good, I said. His head jerked slightly. Because it means you finally heard me. He nodded slowly. I did. Laura shifted. We've talked a lot. We want to do better. I'm not here for promises, I said. I'm here to see if you're learning. They nodded. Emily pulled out a folded page. I want to read something. Her voice shook a little. Things I want to remember. My grandma taught me disappearing quietly is a slow kind of death. That staying soft isn't the same as staying silent. That women don't owe their energy to others' comfort. That love doesn't mean becoming small. That it's okay to outgrow your place at the table and demand a new one. No one spoke for a long time. Laura began clearing dishes. David helped. Emily poured more tea. I sat back, hands in my lap, watching the quiet unfold, not brittle anymore but earned. At the door, David hesitated. I know it'll take time, he said. I have time, I replied, pulling a thin envelope from my bag. What's this? A copy of the tickets. The ones I cancelled. He stared at it, silent. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cool air. Behind me, the door stayed open, not all the way, just enough. I kept them, I said, touching the envelope, not to be cruel, just to remember how easy it was to erase me. David didn't open it, only nodded and slipped it into his pocket. We didn't hug, but we stood close, like two people who might one day understand each other without explaining every scar. At home, I undressed slowly, set my earrings aside, folded the yellow scarf. I looked at myself in the mirror. Older, yes, but not tired. Wiser, not cold. The lines on my face weren't cracks. They were paths, proof I'd found my way back to myself. Before bed, I wrote the last page in my notebook. Things I no longer apologize for. Wanting space, wanting more, saying no, leaving quietly, returning louder. At the bottom, smaller, I was never too old. No one asked if I still dreamed. Now I don't wait to be asked. I go.